Yes. No. Excellent. We are back. And I believe in terms of where we're at is I had asked if there were any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda. And we're good to go. So I'll move that the commission adopt the agenda as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. We'll move on to approving the minutes from our previous commission meeting. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes to the minutes of July 5th? We're good, we're good. All right. I move that the commission approve the minutes of the July 5th, 2023 Canmore Planning Commission meeting as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Nobody. Motion carried unanimously. All right, I will go through the process for this afternoon's Planning Commission meeting. First, administration will present the application before the commission. The commission members can then ask questions or clarification of administration. Then, at the commission's discretion, the applicant may be asked to make a presentation of their application. The applicant will be allowed to speak to their SSR if they have one, and there's a maximum time of 5 minutes. Commission members may ask questions of the applicant during or after the applicant's presentation. At the discretion of the chair, the time for the applicant may be extended to allow for those questions. At the commission's discretion, any member of the public may be permitted to speak regarding the application. There is a time limit of 3 minutes for members of the public. Commission members may also ask questions of clarification to the applicant or administration again, and at the discretion of the chair, the time for the applicant may be extended to allow for that. And the chair, as the chair, I will remind the audience that all communication is to be respectful and on the topic of the application. All right, so we have the development officer, Mr. Snyder, can now make their presentation on the first application in our agenda package. PL 2022-0386.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. The staff report is in the Commission's agenda package. I do have a presentation, and I will be going through that now. Is this good? All right. So this is PL 2022-0386, 1727 Mountain Avenue, which is an application for visitor accommodation. You can see the location of the property on Mountain Avenue. It is currently being occupied by the Craigsway restaurant, and there was a former gas station on the site. The Wendy's, Tim Hortons, Esso is adjacent to the property, and there's other visitor accommodations. I think it's the Pocatera Inn that's on the other side of the property. We have the uses listed on the slide, and it's mostly visitor accommodation or visitor accommodation under construction within this area. So the proposed application is to develop 66 visitor accommodation units in 3 buildings that are aligned with both Bow Valley Trail and Mountain Avenue, which both have frontage onto this property. The applicant is proposing underground and surface parking to accommodate vehicle traffic. There are no other uses being proposed at this moment. This is a summary of what's being proposed. There are a number of variances that are being requested, and staff will be going through those one at a time. For variance authority, the Commission has the jurisdiction to deal with the variances, both generally discretion of the Development Authority under Section 1.14.1 of the Land Use Bylaw and Section 4.6.9, which is a specific variance consideration for the Bow Valley Trail General Land Use District, of which this property is part of. So the first variance that's being considered deals with maximum eave-line height, which according to the bylaw regulations is 7 meters. The applicant has requested that these be raised to an average of 8.4 meters for all buildings, and that goes along with the architectural guidelines that they're dealing with. There are some grade changes on the property, so that's why we're speaking of averages as opposed to a specific maximum. 4.6.91 of the land use bylaw allows for 20%, excuse me, of a building to exceed the maximum height requirement, where the architectural integrity of the building would be enhanced. Staff are satisfied that the architectural program meets this requirement for the variance. In addition, for Building A, which is the building that's closest to Bow Valley Trail, there is a technical variance of floor area step back from the building face. The bylaw requires a minimum of 70% of floor area, and they're requesting 53%. The intent of the regulation is to minimize the impact of massing and scale of the building and access to sunlight and views on pedestrians and cyclists passing along the pathway. For Building A, this is being proposed, and it's basically to achieve the consistency in the massing that they're proposing elsewhere on the site. The applicant is here, and he can speak they can speak to the various changes to the program. The notes from the applicant also include that the proposed design considers the stepping of occupied space and guardrails above the parapet height and between the double height volumes for the loft suite, which will provide better access for views and light along Bow Valley Trail as well. There's an additional variance for Building C, which is changing the maximum building height from 16 meters to 17.37 meters. This sketch has been provided by the applicant, and it shows that due to site topography, there's only a portion of the building that's going over that maximum height area, and you can see that outlined in yellow on the bottom of the roof plan. So it's not a complete building above the height variance. There's only certain portions of it, according to grades, that are. The amount of variance is 1.37 meters or 8.5%, and it's within the maximum variances that are permitted within 4.6.91A of the bylaw, and we're satisfied that this contributes to good site planning and good design for the property. There are a number of variances to the site plan that are being requested. The first one deals with vehicle parking and loading, and the table within the land use bylaw that specifies number of parking spaces for visitor accommodation has the same number for maximum and for minimum. They're proposing 68 stalls as opposed to 66. That's an addition of two barrier-free stalls as well. So we're satisfied that this is an acceptable variance. The front yard setback is dealing with setback along Bow Valley Trail, where as a general regulation, the district requires a 2-meter setback, which is supposed to basically bring the buildings right towards the street. Unfortunately, there is a utility right-of-way in favor of ATCO that's preventing that, and they're asking for a slightly additional variance from the building from 6 meters to 7.8, which will allow for patios to be developed between the building and the utility right-of-way. Staff are in favor of that variance. Number 3 is visitor accommodation specific use regulations, and 8.5.0.3 requires developments to have a street-facing entrance, and the idea of that is that's where the lobby would be facing towards the street. This is a more up-to-date program, I guess, for visitor accommodation, where check-in will not be done from a front desk, it will be done remotely. So therefore we need to, the applicant is requesting that this not be imposed upon their building program, and staff are in favor of that. Finally, the landscape plan that was submitted with the development, it generally complies with the land use bylaw requirements for landscape area and number of trees and shrubs to be provided. But the final landscape plan that was submitted didn't meet the requirements of the ratio of large trees, medium trees to small trees, and coniferous trees to overall numbers of trees. So we're asking that, as opposed to granting a variance here, that the applicant resubmit the landscape plan that properly meets the required tree ratios from large to small. So the recommendation is that the Canmore Planning Commission approve this development permit subject to the conditions of approval set out in Schedule A. Before the hearing this afternoon, I did get a communication this morning from the architect, and they noted a correction that needs to be made to Schedule A to Conditions 7 and 16, which is with respect to their energy efficiency targets that were submitted. So that was placed in error by myself. So it's 5%, not 11.
And I just noticed there's 2 16s as well, because it goes 16 and then there's a new heading and then it goes 16 again, so the numbering needs to be...
We'll renumber them accordingly.
I just noticed that just now. So.
Okay.
All right.
That concludes our present, for options for consideration, excuse me. There we go. So the Planning Commission has 3 options with respect to this permit application. Approve the application subject to the conditions or in addition to others contained in the Schedule A. Refuse the application specifying the planning related reasons for refusal, or postpone the application pending submission of any additional details as requested by the Commission. I'm happy to take your questions, and as I said before, the applicant's representatives are here today as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Are there any questions from Commission members for the Development Officer? Mr. Talbot?
Yes, Mr. Snyder, how long does that URW run along the frontage area past this property?
Pardon me?
Is the URW the right-of-way along the front consistent across all sites along there, so it runs essentially from the set of lights to the visitors station?
I'm not aware of the exact extents of it, but I know that it affects other properties within the area.
So it's consistent all
Yep.
the way along? Okay.
Yep.
My next question, I'll be brief on this one, is you mentioned that you requested a landscape plan that meets the municipal criteria, what happens if the applicant is not able to provide one?
If the applicant is not
Isn't
able,
able to provide one to your satisfaction?
it would be referred back to the Planning Commission for further
That-
review as the approving authority.
Okay, and if nobody has any other questions, got one more. I just noticed that the loading was short, a loading stall, is that correct?
It does not have a loading stall. However, there is a provision within the land use bylaw that if staff are satisfied that they can do, quote unquote, loading activities within the confines of the site, then we're satisfied with that. And in this case, we're talking about resupply of hotel units, laundry, things like that. That can be accomplished with the amount of parking that's available during the morning periods after people have checked out. So we're satisfied that they don't need a dedicated loading stall. Excuse me.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Youngin, do you have questions?
What was the original intent in the bylaw for the requirement for street visible entry lobby?
I'd be speculating on that. I think that was probably at the time that the land use bylaw was approved. There were hotels that were being developed with lobbies, and it was expected that they would be oriented for visibility. So you're driving down the street, and you can see that along Bow Valley Trail with some of the older properties that they have a large entrance with a canopy or a carport, or a sign that says lobby over here. So those are oriented to the street, and I think that was reflecting. I'm not sure if Ms. Miller would have any further comment to that or not, but.
I was just wondering if there was something about, animating the street that we're losing there, but it sounds like administration is in support of that variance.
Yeah, we're in support of the variance. I mean, we understand that, we understand how this hotel is going to be run, or visitor accommodation, if you will. With remote check-in, there isn't the need to go into a centralized place. You basically go into the building and you enter your own unit. So it's not. I guess it's the extension of how some accommodations are being developed these days.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hillstad? Oh, all right.
Thank you. Through the chair, I had a couple questions related to the parking requirements. I'm wondering if, I guess, firstly, is there a particular requirement for barrier-free parking spaces as a ratio to the overall parking?
There would be a building code requirement for that.
Okay.
So it's not within the land use bylaw for barrier-free stalls.
But it would be a requirement as part of the building code?
Yep.
And what does the building code require, I guess, in this case? Is to the requirement, or?
I don't know that answer.
Okay.
Perhaps the applicant is an architect.
Okay, I can
knows
redirect the
building
question to
code.
the applicant then. I guess in knowing that there's potentially a need for barrier-free spaces, but the bylaw requires a 1-to-1 ratio of parking per unit. I guess how are barrier-free spaces typically accommodated in similar type developments that are visitor spaces? Are they typically added on top of the one, or are they accommodated as part of the overall total?
The ones that I've seen, and these are more mixed-use developments where they're being looked at as part of the entire development and not limited to one of the uses. So this application is a little unique, at least in the ones that I've been dealing with since I've gotten to Canmore, is that it's a single-use property.
Okay, I know that the commission has seen a number of proposals this year for visitor accommodation developments. I think if I recall correctly, this is the first time this particular variance has come up. And I guess I'm wondering if administration has a particular position on how those spaces are accommodated with respect to the overall ratio.
Through you, Madam Chair, we don't have a position at this point. We have seen, I think you kind of alluded to at the outset of your question, various approaches to barrier-free stalls, but we have not established a regulation within the land use bylaw that specifically requires barrier-free stalls.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bessot. I also had a couple questions around the stalls for the applicant, so that might help us at that stage. Councillor Hillstad? Good. I do have a couple questions. In terms of the town's enhanced green construction requirements for the floor area above E line step back variance, would that apply to all the buildings or just building A?
No, the applicant is submitted, will be submitting information with their building permit for all of the development. It just so happens that we have to look at, we're looking at their initial recommendations, but it's because of that one specific variance to the building that we have to mention it at this time.
Oh, okay. So for that variance, the floor area above eave line step back, it's required that the development meet an enhanced green status. Is that in the? And I guess I'm just wondering if the variance is just for building A, if the enhanced green energy, building design for energy applies to all three buildings or just to building A for the variance?
Well, they'll apply to all the buildings.
Okay.
Yeah. The green building program will be for the development as a whole, Madam Chair.
Okay. And is there like within the green construction requirements, is there like a min max, or is it, because it says 5% improvement better than NECB current version, does that meet the guidelines, or do we have a minimum that we expect when we're granting that type of variance?
I don't have the land use bylaw in front of me at this moment.
Me either, okay. I just, and then that's okay, because I had a follow-up question for the applicant when they're up as well
Okay.
around that, so that might help me as well. I'm just trying to understand why 5% improvement better than the current version. And then, do you know, 5% improvement better than the NECB currently, what would that equate to the new tiered system?
Yeah, that question I'm not sure, but I think the applicant can provide that information.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Those
Okay.
are all of my weird questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. It says in my script that I should ask you if you have any closing remarks.
Not really, no.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the applicant is here. And we all right. Perfect. And if you could introduce yourselves and
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Sparrow. I'm a principal and architect at Metaphor Architecture in Calgary.
And hi everyone. I'm Courtney Clark, and I'm a project architect at Metaphor.
thank you.
And through discussion, as we went through the development permit application with the with administration, it was to, yep. Sorry, I know. Eat the mic, right? Eat the mic. Through discussions with the planning department, it was determined they felt like the application was fairly clear and straightforward and that a presentation from our team would not be required. However, we are here and available to answer any questions.
Okay, awesome. I think there might be some questions. I'll start with opening it up to my fellow commission members for questions. Ms. Bessot?
Yeah, I guess to follow up on the line of inquiry to administration related to parking. So I guess I'm wondering why the 2 barrier-free spaces are in addition to the 66 units spaces.
Sure, no problem. It's a good question. The primary reason is we've been doing a lot of these visitor accommodation properties in recent times, and a concern that's being raised by developers and owners is that if we include barrier-free parking within the maximum and guests arrive that don't require barrier-free stalls, then they have nowhere to park. We believe the intent of the bylaw is to ensure that each stall has one parking stall for each unit that is accessible to anyone who uses that unit. And so we have, in this application and in others, begun the exploration of including the barrier-free in addition to. We don't think it surcharges the site in terms of increasing the parking, but we think it makes sure that both the requirements of the site for users that don't need barrier-free or don't have the placard required to use a barrier-free stall are included, as well as barrier-free users.
I have a follow-up question. If this is in the information that you have available, but is there any sense of how often all of the parking spaces would be occupied at like the same moment? If you were to, is there not an option, I guess, conversely, to have 66 spaces, which would include the 2, and not have individual spaces assigned to individual units, recognizing that there might be visitors coming who are opting for many of the other means of transportation we have available in the Bow Valley?
I think I understand the question. The challenge is if we don't have dedicated barrier-free parking, then where do people who require barrier-free access park? The parking lot could be full, or the most convenient stalls for the buildings could be full, which applies an unnecessary or undue burden to those individuals. If we do have barrier-free parking on site and it's included in the count, obviously then there's a potential that someone may arrive and be unable to park on site. In terms of how often the sites are full, I don't have any numbers on hand. I would suspect the summer is a very busy time, as well as weekends during the winter. I heard anecdotally once upon a time that the town had looked into that as a part of establishing the new bylaw requirements a few years ago that reduced parking requirements on sites to this maximum of 1. However, I don't know that that information was disseminated to the public.
Commission Member Talbot?
A couple of questions for the applicant. What is the code requirement under the Alberta Building Code for barrier-free stalls for a project such as this? If you don't know, that's fine. There's a table that everybody refers to.
Yeah, so we have the, you want to take it?
Go ahead.
Yeah. We have some optionality in terms of which portion of the building code that we pursue for this project, and one area of the code would not require any barrier-free parking. We don't think that's a very inclusive approach to development. Another area of the code would require, I believe off the top of my head, 3 parking stalls.
Okay, so the answer is it depends.
Yes.
Okay. Next one is, there's a statement within the submission that loading will be encouraged to occur for the retail during business hours, I believe, or after business hours is how it was phrased. How does the applicant propose that that works, given the majority of deliveries are companies that work during business hours?
So the model of the model of the development is that these will be condominiumized and sold to individual owners. each unit, and so each unit owner is responsible for the maintenance and turnover of their individual unit. It's not treated as a individual hotel with a rental pool. This is fairly common with other visitor accommodation developments in the municipality. So our expectation is that the unit owners would use the one available stall that's generally speaking allotted for their unit to do the turnover, and then guests would use the same stall or rush stall if they're unassigned to use the unit when it's being occupied.
Okay, so retail sales unit is applicable to a rental unit is really what that says.
That may be a typo.
Okay, that's
no
fine.
retail, yeah.
That makes more sense now that I understand. And my final question has to do with, there's 2 private pathways that intersect the public pathway and the drive aisle. And in looking at the landscape plan, which at this stage it's not super detailed, I was just trying to figure out the integration between where those essentially a private pathway tees into a multi-use public pathway, and the same for the driveway. And if you ride down in that area or walk, most people that are leaving those establishments, not just this one, are not paying attention. They're paying attention to where they're going, or they don't know where they're going. And I'm just wondering if there's any sorts of ideas that the applicant has in terms of making sure there's no conflicts between those on the public pathway and those entering from the private or from the project.
Speaking to the 2 private pathways that are adjoining the multi-use, we could look into options to have where that interface is explored further if needed. Currently, they're just showing it as abutting to the Bow Valley Trail, so the multi-use pathway. As far as the actual access for the roadway goes, those were aligned to the existing. So we've, for the driveway access, we've looked to use like the appropriate engineering standard and guidelines with the flare, and have that placement is coordinated with other projects in the area and the existing access way.
Yeah, and my concern was in looking at that and having been out in in that area frequently, is the speed at which some of the individuals leaving those sites, non-intentional, but they're usually leaving. So speed control mechanisms, speed humps in terms of the road itself, or even a post. I know that this isn't probably the safest thing, by the pathway, so people know that there's an integration and to slow down. It also creates a delineation between what's private and what's public.
Mm-hmm.
I know sometimes that's not the best planning, but it's also, I look at it from safety. So is there any consideration to doing something? I'm looking at safety only on this one, so.
The only comment I'll make is we will have to be cognizant of that utility right-of-way. So if there are measures that are considered, we'll have to make sure that we are clear of any
Yeah, I would
installation.
anticipate this is within your 2 meters. So it's something that I would encourage the applicant, myself, to, with Mr. Snyder, when you're submitting the final landscape plan, to give that some consideration while maintaining the view lines. It's got good view lines exiting, so there's good visibility for the cars.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's something where good visibility usually means you hit the gas pedal or you shift into turbo on your bike. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Everyone's good? Okay. I had a quick question around the, wait, here, let's get back. The variance that had a green building requirement tied to it, why 5% above what is currently required in terms of energy efficiency?
The intention is to meet or exceed the minimum requirements for NECB compliance, and especially with this project and the typology, that is our current target, as opposed to following the part 9.36 of the code. So just looking at townhouses and others similar and the like, that is an option. So we've opted for looking at that compliance, and the 5% is to make sure that's exceeded, and that would apply, as was already discussed, for all buildings. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, and for clarity, and maybe to address the question you asked earlier, there is no minimum requirement for the level above the code minimum that is required by the bylaw. It just needs to exceed it.
Okay.
So we feel 5% at least just gives us a measurable distance and a demonstration of, you know, that we're trying to be purposeful about improving the energy performance of the project.
Awesome. And then in terms of the barrier-free parking stalls, are those connected to units that are also barrier-free, or are they just located within the site plan or the underground parking?
They're not connected to any kind of accessible unit. It's there more for, as Chris had mentioned, providing that accessibility for visitors, and it's access from site, not within the parkade. So, yeah.
All right, those were my questions. Is there anything that you wanted to add at the end here?
No.
No? Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mr. Sparrow and Ms. Clark, for your time. I see that we do have a member of the public in the gallery. I'll ask if there's any members of the public who wish to speak regarding this application. And, okay, and there's a 3-minute time.
Madam Chair, are the other members of commission okay with the public member speaking? Okay, thanks.
Hello, my name is Donna Houston. I saw the public notice in the paper last week, and so because this is another visitor accommodation, I put my opposition into this type of build for Canmore. I'm here to remind everybody we're in a housing crisis. Just came from a staff housing forum last night, saw a couple faces there. But I'm also a little bit confused on procedure, because I saw the public notice. I thought this was the first notice. This application is not on the web. There's no agenda posted for today. When I responded with my opposition, I was told that public comment is now closed, but this is the first time I've had an opportunity to see it. So I'm wondering, one, I'm a bit confused on protocol. But yeah, the last thing we need is more visitor accommodation. I've been speaking to this, and I'll continue speaking to this because I want more people to hear it in the community. Just this morning, there was more complaints that the sewage smells were making it into town, and that we have issues with our water treatment center and the capacity. Are these things taken into account as we're approving more visitor accommodations, more traffic into town? Although I was glad to see that a lot of the variances were, for the betterment of the project, other than height. That one is still one that I wish we would stop seeing. 1 meter, 2 meters above, everything's getting taller. It's not matching the landscape. We're losing that architectural art and flow that real estate's supposed to bring. A lot of the buildings we're seeing, they're fast builds, they're cheaper builds. Profit, bulking them up is the priority. We're missing a lot of flow. We're missing a lot of art. We're missing creativity. We're missing longevity in these types of builds. Let alone anywhere there's a hotel, there could have been an apartment. Also, I was here speaking on behalf of Base Camp not that long ago in favor of their staff accom above their light industrial. But today I'm speaking against more visitor accom by Base Camp. We don't need any more. They've been on a fast-track bullet train. There's no benefit to the community on these height variances, on the various things. And so to deny their staff housing build but approve their visitor accom, what message is that sending to the community? What message is that sending to the developer? So I'd like to just, again, keep pointing these things out. I've been asking for two-way conversations with administration, with the town, with council, with various boards and committees. There is a need for a two-way conversation. There is a need to really talk about real estate from one end of the spectrum all the way to the other and really talk about aligned community values. Last night, a lot of the small business community was in the room, and they're scared. Their security is at risk. Their livelihood is at risk. So I'm going to continue showing up and put my opposition in. So thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank you, Ms. Houston. I do know that as the Canmore Planning Commission, our agendas and meeting minutes are on the website. And I would ask if there's anything that administration would like to add at this time.
Sure. So today's package is on the website currently. As commission members, that's where you download your package from, so that much we can confirm. We have noted that this particular application is not currently showing on the website, but it is also not a statutory requirement for it to be posted on the website. It is a requirement for the application to be signposted so that the public will know that there's an application in and how they can participate in the process. And there is a comment period associated with that. The notice that's in the newspaper does give people a second opportunity to provide an opportunity for them to be part of this public meeting, and if commission gives them the ability to speak, to come and speak to those concerns. So from procedural perspective, that is the current state for this particular application.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Do any commission members have any questions of clarification of the applicant or administration? And, all right. And does administration, any closing remarks or comments in general?
Not at this time.
Okay. So, go. My script is weird. All right, so now we will move into the decision portion. Does the commission need to make changes to condition 7 or 16 by motion?
Preferably, yes.
Do I just I'm ready to make that motion, but I don't have the specifics of what it should be changed to. I'd ask maybe for, if Mr. Snyder had something for me, I could make that motion. Or we could take a small break. So let's take a 5-minute break.
Sure.
So I can get that motion ready, even though I would prefer 11%.
Okay.
I'm just going to say that.
Well, that is at the discretion of the Planning Commission to make that change if necessary, but we'll take you said 5-minute break?
Okay. Oh,
Or
All right, we're back, and I am prepared to make a motion that I thought we'd deal with this first, since that's exactly why we took the break, instead of starting on something new, but I'm just the chair. All right, that the Canmore Planning Commission direct administration to renumber conditions following prior to the release of the building permit and commencement of construction conditions from 16 through 22 to 17 through 23, and under the new numbering system, amend condition 7 to read, the developer agrees to comply with the requirements for enhanced green construction, and that the development will be a minimum 5% better than the current NECB in place at the time of development as outlined in Section 11 Green Building Regulations of the Land Use Bylaw, and amend condition 17 to read, prior to the release of the building permit, the developer shall provide a pre-construction energy report estimating that the building will achieve a minimum of 5% better than the current NECB in place at the time of development to the satisfaction of the development officer. All right, are there any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried unanimously. During the break, a question around condition 18 came up. I'll go to Ms. Spessot to ask a clarifying question of admin, if administration is okay with that. Okay, perfect.
I just noticed in condition 18, there was reference to a public plaza, I believe, within the municipal right-of-way. And I don't believe I saw any such feature on the landscape plan. And I was wondering if that is an error in the condition, or if there's an intent to provide something on the landscape plan.
We're just double checking. Just give us a moment.
I can make a motion that the Canmore Planning Commission direct administration to remove section 19 under the new numbering. And that's my motion. I think that covers.
Is it,
No, because then it would automatically renumber.
so to clarify, is it to delete the entire condition or just the mention of the public plaza?
I think, to me, what I'm reading here would apply in a scenario where part of the landscaping on site would then turn into town-owned land, but it's a requirement that the property owner maintain that landscaping instead of the town. And since there's no part of this parcel that will turn over to the town as a plaza or a right-of-way, I'm not sure, I don't think that the condition applies in this circumstance.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that that was the intent of,
I mean, obviously, if it stayed in, if there was no public plaza located within a future municipal right-of-way, then it wouldn't apply. So I don't think that it being in there would affect anything. So, but if it shouldn't be there, I'm all right taking it out.
so we can, so there are a couple options. We can strike the mention of the public plaza. As you've noted, there may not be landscaping that will be in that right-of-way, but if there were to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've just gone back and looked over the parks and engineering comments, and I do apologize to the commission for that condition being in error.
Okay.
Yep, there is a pathway that engineering are working with the applicant on, and there will be the requirement of tree protection.
So we should leave this in.
It's the public plaza part.
Okay. Yes. All right. Let me rephrase my motion that the Canmore Planning Commission direct administration to remove reference of a public plaza from condition 19. Success.
Thank you.
Now that we got our heads wrapped around. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously? All right. Are there any other motions from commission members? Ms. Bessot?
Can I move a motion for specific condition number 4? The developer is required to provide 68 parking stalls. I'm wondering, I don't know the specific language, but if we want to say either up to 68 parking stalls or add some specificity around the barrier-free intention.
Madam Chair, may I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, Ms.
So, Ms. Bizot, are you trying to explicitly identify the barrier-free stalls as part of the 68?
I think fundamentally, I guess maybe still have some pause about oversupplying parking on this site, and would like to potentially leave open a scenario, knowing there's going to be further discussions on the landscape plan, that maybe this, I guess, ties us into 68 parking stalls, and whether there might be potential in the future to still go back to the 66. Sorry, that's recognized confusing.
I think that if we change the wording to be up to, then we create a scenario where we might not even get the minimum as required by the land use bylaw, which is 66. So I want to make sure that that is achieved. And then in terms of,
could we say then, if we're going 68, like the specific reference to 2 of which will be barrier-free?
so if I understand you correctly, the motion would be that the Canmore Planning Commission direct administration to amend condition 4 to read that the developer is required to provide 68 vehicle parking stalls, 2 of which will be barrier-free. We got that? Councillor Hillstad?
Could I provide a friendly amendment to that with just being with a minimum of 2, so that way it's at least 2, and if they want to provide more barrier-free, they can.
All right. So that's the developer is required to provide 68 vehicle parking stalls with a minimum of 2 being barrier-free. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bessot. I'll call the motion to question unless, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Are there any further motions from the commission to consider? All right, all right. I will, So I will move that the Canmore Planning Commission approve development permit number PL 2022-0386. Is that the, I just didn't have the, I don't think I have a recommended motion in my script for approving. So that's that's all I had. Do you want me to include the address?
Nope, you can, the file number is sufficient, but just as that it's with the Schedule A as amended.
With Schedule A as amended. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Hillstad.
I'm happy to approve this. Again, the Bow Valley Trail General Commercial District is meant to be visitor accommodation. That is the main purpose of this, so this is meeting that purpose. I think the 2 additional barrier-free parking stalls, it makes sense for why those variants are being asked for, because again, I can see that issue where if you have one stall per each individual unit and someone needs barrier-free, it could cause, if you have a full weekend where every stall is being used, you could have issues with that. So the logic behind that makes sense. The other conditions and variances also make sense just due to the site conditions and the right-of-ways and the grades and all those things. So overall, I agree with administration in their reasoning for the variances, so I'm happy to approve this.
Thank you, Councillor Hillstad. Mr. Youngman?
I would just like to make a general comment that Canmore Planning Commission doesn't have the ability to compel landowners to provide staff accommodation or any kind of development on this property, and visitor accommodation is a permitted use, and so we have very limited abilities for what we can do there. So I think the variances that are presented are minor, and they allow for architectural integrity of the building, and so I'm happy to support the approval of this project.
Thank you, Mr. Youngman. Mr. Talbot?
I too will support this application. The variances are, as Mr. Younger said, minor. In keeping with Mr. Hillstad's comments, this isn't about visitor accommodation land use, it's about the variances. So I do believe this is a good project for that site, so I will be lending my support.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Ms. Spessot?
Since we're all contributing comments this time, I'll add, I too recognize the limitations that we have in addressing some of the matters that were raised earlier, and recognizing that this is a visitor accommodation unit in an area where visitor accommodation is contemplated and put forward by the policy documents. It does align well. I guess to my comments on parking, just cognizant that there is challenges on the site, it seems, in terms of the landscaping and the area that might become available for trees and other plantings, and knowing that parking and paving those areas kind of does take away some of the opportunities potentially to provide more greenery on site, and also the easier we make it for people to drive and park, the harder it will be to achieve, I guess, some of the goals relative to sustainable mobility. But I'm happy to see that there is bicycle parking and connections to the network provided in this proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Spessot. I will also speak in favor of this application. Visitor accommodation is a permitted use in this area of the Bow Valley Trail Area Redevelopment Plan. And not only that, this area is specifically identified for the visitors of our community and services for visitors to our community. It's not up to the Canmore Planning Commission to decide that that is not appropriate when that is council direction per the statutory planning documents that we have before us to consider. As for the variances, I find, like my colleagues, that they are justifiable given the architecture and the site planning and design. And having spent a lot of time go into the current occupant of the site, Craig's Way Station, for their delicious breakfasts. The grade of the site, it is a very sloping grade. So the height variance isn't about making a bigger building. It's about the fact that how we measure height is from one spot. And so for those buildings are all the same height as far as I can tell. And I also have spent many years covering the Planning Commission, and all of the information is available online and advertised in the Rocky Mountain Outlook. And I think that it's really important that those in the community who are interested in understanding planning and development and being part of this process, it's also a responsibility to go to those places and look for these things that are advertised in a way that everyone can find them. And I don't think that there is any issue whatsoever in how this has been, the public notification of this application has been undertaken. And I appreciate as well that we are having community conversations around these things, but the Planning Commission's job is what it is, and we have a permitted use in front of us with justifiable variances, and that is why I will be in support of it. So I'll call to question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously, and I realize I was talking like really hot into that mic there, and I hope I didn't sound too aggressive. I just trying to, address some of the concerns I heard raised by the member of the public who spoke. Ms. Miller.
I know we're past closing remarks, but I would just like to note for the record for those who may be watching at home that we are currently piloting a project for larger notice of application and notice of decision signage in order to ensure that the public is aware and knows the process that they can participate in order to influence these decisions when and where possible. So we do recognize the current signage is not totally visible if you're not looking for it, and we are moving to signage that will be more eye-catching so that people will know what's going on within their community.
And I would also note too that the Planning Commission meets the last Wednesday of the month, and if we have applications in front of us, that is generally speaking when we are here. And so leading up to the end of the month, that's when those interested in following this process can look for that information to be advertised. So I know we have another application in front of us. Do we want to take a small break? Does anyone need? We're good to go. I thank the applicants for being here, Mr. Sparrow, Ms. Clark, Spencer. Thank you for coming. Okay.
I think it's actually good to hear that you're contemplating changes in the signage, because I do think that I'm glad to hear that planning is contemplating changes to the signage, because I think there was a valid point raised there today. If developments are advertised, it hits the website on the Friday before the Planning Commission, and there's like an 8.5 by 11 sign on a fence somewhere. I do understand why people feel that they kind of slip by them. So I'm glad to hear that planning is contemplating a little bit more prominent signage.
That pilot project has begun. It began August 1st and will continue until August 1st of 2024. And then we'll reevaluate the effectiveness of the signage and any changes we may need to make associated with that. So.
Just over the top of it all. Just this one's changing. This one. I don't have an excuse to go to work.
Are you going to fly over?
Yes, please.
All right, I think we're ready to go with administration presenting on PL 20230133, One Silvertip Trail. Mr. Snyder, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. The commission will recall last month the same property was considered for a series of signage approvals. One Silvertip Trail is located at the corner of Palliser Trail and Silvertip Trail, and is within the Silvertip area structure plan. The property has a the property has a direct control DC district on it, which is why the Planning Commission is duty-bound to hear all development applications, big or small, related to this property and those in the area as well. The proposed development, and this will, I'm going to try and enlarge this. The proposed development deals with the area that's shaded in gray. That's the restaurant of the existing hotel, which is currently being rebranded and under renovation. With respect to uses within the direct control district, eating and drinking establishment is not a specifically listed use. However, accessory uses are listed as discretionary uses. So in evaluating this application, which is for exterior alterations only to an existing use, the administration are satisfied that this is a discretionary use within the DC district. The proposal is to add add 2 doors and to replace a number of windows that face outward from the restaurant, which would be oriented towards the highway and eventually the Three Sisters Mountains as well. This is an example of the proposed use, and again, okay, all right. So these are elevations of the new doors that are going to be replaced. The applicant will also be able to give an explanation of what they're looking to do. In summary, we're recommending approval of this application, subject to standard conditions, with the addition of one condition that they complete the application, or they complete the renovation in accordance with the drawings that have been submitted. Staff have no other comments to make on this application, but we do recommend in favor of the application. The Commission has 3 options which were discussed at the previous application. Those still stand as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Do any of my fellow Commission members have questions? Mr. Youngin? We're good. All right. Does the applicant have any submissions to make? Mr. Sparrow is back again. He really likes us. He's here every month.
Thank you, Commission, for hearing this application. Yes, my name is Chris Sparrow, principal of Metaphor, as mentioned in the previous application. I wanted to take the opportunity as a part of this application to give you guys some insight into what's currently happening and what's anticipated to come forward. This is in response. I was present for the stripping and grading development permit that was reviewed in the spring, and I heard your concerns about not having visibility on the site itself, what's coming, and so I felt it would be prudent to at least, with the client's owner's blessing, share some information with you so you guys could understand. The hotel is a former Holiday Inn. It's been rebranded, I'm sure as you're all aware, and as a part of the rebranding and some additional upgrading and redevelopment to the site is being explored by the owner. The interior was refreshed, finishes and fixtures were refreshed over the last 6 months, and as a part of that rebranding and repositioning of the property, there are additional future development activities that are anticipated. This application and the restaurant application, which was a building permit only application because it was to an existing use and didn't require a change of use. We wanted to bring this application for this door and window piece forward quickly, and so that it could be completed with that restaurant renovation and not require or impair the financial viability of the site through disruption of guests and the like. So this application is an independent one from some other applications that are coming forward. You'll notice here phase 1 in the red, that's one that you are aware of because it was discussed during the stripping and grading, that there is going to be a series of exterior spa accessory elements introduced to the site. That's an application that we're working on currently and will be submitted to the town today, actually. Resubmitted to the town. It's already in. We're also exploring, as a part of a future phase, an expansion to the hotel itself. And while we haven't totally confirmed what the program of that is, that's anticipated to take place and be located to the north end of the existing development, and in effect will complete what I think is right now looks like an uncompleted building. And lastly, there's a south zone that's just immediately adjacent to this proposed renovation to the exterior, which is anticipated to include some patio space. However, that scope of work has not been commissioned yet and is expected to follow probably in next year sometime. And that's basically all I wanted to share with you, is just to give you guys a bit more context, a bit more information to support you in making your decision today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sparrow. Are there any questions from commission members? No questions? I see there are no members of the public in the gallery. So we can move into decision mode. Are there, I guess I should put the recommended motion up, that the Canmore Planning Commission approve PL 2023-0133, subject to the conditions in Schedule A? No, Mr. Schneider's going to get it back for me. That the Canmore Planning Commission approve PL 2023-0133, subject to the conditions of approval set out in the Schedule A. Are there any motions or amendments? Any comments? All right, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Snyder and Mr. Sparrow. And Ms. Miller, I believe, let me check my agenda. Is there other planning business?
There is none.
No. The next scheduled meeting is September 27th, in case people would like to follow that. And I will make a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Amazing. Thank you, everyone.